All right. Well, welcome everyone. And thanks for making the AMBA Sustainability Task Force meeting this afternoon. Really appreciate everyone taking time for these meetings, and hopefully we'll have another good conversation today. Really would like to thank Daniela Mallon from the Cool Farm Alliance, who is going to be presenting to us first today. She'll be going through some slides for about 20 minutes or so, but then we're going to open it up for Q&A. And wanted to bring her and her group in today because a lot of you I know are starting to dabble or experiment with the Cool Farms tool. And so her group does support that tool. And so I thought if anyone had questions or trying to figure out a better way for us to utilize that tool within the barley industry, I thought this would be a good first step just to kind of learn more. So with that, I don't want to tie up too much time just chatting. I will go ahead and turn it over to Daniela. And as I said before, we are recording this session. So if you have to drop off at any point in time, that's totally fine. I'll send the recording out later, probably tomorrow. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. Well, happy to be here with you all. Are you starting to see my screen? I'm moving it into presentation mode. So let me know if that's working.
Looks good.
All right, great. Yeah, appreciate the invitation, Ashley. And I'm happy to also do a live demo of the tool. We'll start with some slides and see how far we get. But just to give folks kind of an overview of the Cool Farm Alliance and the Cool Farm tool. And I hope it's not too much repeat. I did see some familiar kind of names of companies. So you may already know some of this stuff, but hopefully it won't get too repetitive. So the Cool Farm Alliance is the owner, and we maintain and own the Cool Farm tool. And the mission statement here is the first thing that I'll put in front of you. So to accelerate the transition to regenerative and sustainable agriculture by providing globally aligned, credible, and science-based metrics, tools, and resources that create impact. I want to hearken quickly to another way that we've sometimes articulate our mission, and it has been for many years, which is to enable millions of growers around the world to make more informed on-farm decisions. And these missions, either way you look at them, really speak to two things, and that is scale and kind of democratization of knowledge. So putting the complexities of the science in the hands of growers who can actually make decisions. So that's really what kind of we're up to with the Cool Farm Alliance and the Cool Farm tool. It's a tool that you can interact with, you can ask questions, you can do what-if scenarios, and you can fairly quickly and immediately gain some pretty significant steps forward in your general insight on how agriculture relates to climate change mitigation. And therefore, buyer and supplier in the supply chain can have kind of the same conversation, or some people have said a sort of fact-based conversation, or it also, because of all that, allows the conversation to happen kind of one way that one person said it is at the right level. So you're not speaking in abstractions, and you're not getting too deep in the weeds, but you're really able to have kind of an engaged conversation. So this next slide shows a little bit of the span of the membership in the Cool Farm Alliance. So this is, a group of companies, large and small, NGOs, academics. It's quite a range and quite a mix. And it's been growing. I think there's a slide coming up that'll show the rate of growth, but definitely from a pipe dream that we had many years ago to help bring some sort of consistency to the industry when we did that with, sort of maybe 13, 20 major companies, now to see this level of sort of critical mass is pretty significant. So it really has gotten some traction in the industry as a place to come to for an aligned approach to quantification. I'll say more about that in a little bit. Just sort of quickly on governance, this is our supervisory board, the general structure of the organization. This may not be of tremendous interest, but just in case, and you'll have access to these slides later if you want. So the main thing to point out here is that the governance is organized around these two councils. So on the one side, there's the Science Advisory Council. On the other side, it's the Member Advisory Council. And the members really feed into these councils through various working groups. So, this is an area of growth for us. We're really looking to increase the engagement with the tool and with the community. The engagement with the tool has been there for a while, but really building more of the interaction among the network within the Cool Farm Alliance. So this is now the management team, just in case you see these names and faces. A key aspect of the Cool Farm tool in general is its scientific foundation, and this is really governed by the Science Advisory Council that I just mentioned. And it is this body that, as well as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that really is in charge of the ongoing underlying science and methods of the Cool Farm tool and staying on top of that science as it evolves. So getting into the tool, of course, this is kind of the centerpiece of the Alliance, a quantified decision support tool for the measurement and impact of agricultural practice with a focus on greenhouse gases, first and foremost, but also water. And that's quantity, not quality, food loss and waste, and biodiversity. So there's modules for each of those. Now, the centerpieces of the tool really are these 6 principles. So farmer focused, there are lots of academic tools that are highly sophisticated with hundreds of data inputs. This is not that. Farmer focused in the sense that really asks questions that generally farmers know off the top of their heads. So that keeping the questions as sort of as streamlined and simple as possible. Farmer focused in one other key way, and that is that it is free to farmers anywhere. Any individual farmer may go today onto the website and access the Cool Farm tool. This is an industry, it's a public asset. The Cool Farm Alliance is a not-for-profit. This isn't a commercial offering. You know, it's not a piece of software that we're selling. This is an industry platform in which to come together in consensus around how to quantify agricultural greenhouse gas emissions and other metrics. And it is freely given to the public. Where money comes in is when commercial entities want to do more sophisticated things like aggregate data, analyze data, export data, share data. So it's in really the data management that the commercial licenses come into play. So I wanted to make that point, kind of emphasize that most, the farmer focused. Now, as you heard, underpinning this is the scientific foundation. And then this third pillar now, the industry owned. So again, it's not an academic tool owned and housed in a academic setting. It is an industry asset that we co-own together and can improve together. Multi-pathway, so it was greenhouse gas at first and only crop, but there have been quite a few kind of pathway specific enhancements. So dairy has its own pathway, beef has its own pathway. We're building a new perennials pathway. Potatoes have some specific questions. Rice have some specific questions. Of course, there's the biodiversity and the water. So there's different kind of ways through the Cool Farm tool. And multi-metric is what I just talked about. Now, the final thing I just want to mention here is global. There's lots of tools out there. There's quite a few tools that have a crop that are their focus, like Palm GHG, for example. There's other tools that are really focused on a particular country. They're based in that country, France or Canada. They have HOLOS. That's where the Cool Farm tool distinguishes itself, is in being globally applicable and to all crops and livestock, which gives us the opportunity also to bring a level of harmonization and standardization. Now, this is really just to make the point that multiple stakeholders have a shared need for these kinds of quantifications that are scalable and insightful. So it could be at an academic setting that research is taking place. It could be on the farm where decisions are making, but it could be in the industry where we're trying to report against science-based targets or build some kind of product that has a carbon type of characteristic to it. So it can be a commercial advantage. So just quickly, in terms of some of the things I was saying before, where the different metrics play. For crops, we have all the metrics, so greenhouse gas, water, food loss and waste, and working on perennials. Livestock is just a GHG, so none of the other metrics. And biodiversity is on a whole farm basis rather than on a per crop basis. Biodiversity is suited for temperate forested areas and Mediterranean, and we're now bringing in the tropical. So not all biomes just yet. 17 languages. And of course, beyond the metrics mentioned, there's also profitability, nitrogen use efficiency, soil organic carbon, a range of other performance indicators that you can access through the tool. So how is the tool used? This is a pretty kind of, it may seem like a lot of bullets, but if you take them together, they really do summarize the nature of the tool. So engagement is the first bullet here. This tool is first and foremost about engagement. As I was saying at the beginning, it really enables a level of conversation and a type of conversation that was previously difficult to have. So really it acts as an engagement vehicle. Of course, you can baseline current practices, identify hotspots and areas for improvement, and then design programs for intervention and farmer engagement strategies. Of course, after that, you would monitor and track progress over time. You can compare growers as long as you're doing these analysis on a consistent basis from one farm to the next. Capturing data for external reporting, developing product attributes, as mentioned. And finally, really, this is the hope, is illustrate the synergy between more resilient farming and greenhouse gas emissions mitigation or other sustainability benefits. So that's the really, that's the kind of the fun that's, of this work, is that when decisions are made that from an agronomic perspective make more sense, they often have greenhouse gas benefits. When you build the qualities of your soil, you also tend to be reducing your need for fertilizer. So there's all these like real synergies and win-wins, and the Cool Farm tool can really shine that light on those win-wins. So yeah, just a little bit on how the organization as such has been growing. There's been a tremendous increase in uptake, and that is both something we've worked hard for and sort of expected, in the sense that as the tool has improved and hit the target better in that sweet spot between accuracy, precision, and usability, we've been able to really grow, and that growth has also meant that multiple kinds of organizations can really look at these sustainability metrics in the same way, which is to say that the language starts to make more sense because we're speaking the same language. A little look at where around the world the Cool Farm tool is used. So quite a bit in Asia and Western, well, Europe generally, also the US, but we're seeing quite a bit of use other areas. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out about this particular slide is that the use of the tool has grown very dramatically. We're actually up at more than 30,000 now registered web users, each with many fields and many countries involved. But the area of growth that is most dramatic is really in this application programming interface. So one piece of software speaking to another, and in this case, to the Cool Farm tool. So a lot of farm management software already collects most of the data that the Cool Farm tool would need. Why ask a farmer to enter their data twice. And that's the purpose of the API. So then you can take that data and feed it right through. This is a little bit at how that API works. We do the most used API is something called Calculate, which doesn't actually store data on the Cool Farm Tool server. So you just send the inputs that you need, you get the results. There's no concern about where's my data going and who has access to it. The point of this slide is really to say that the amount of data needed is kind of manageable. It may look like a lot, but there's quite a few things that are, not needed for all crops and not needed at all, really. If there is no irrigation, you don't need to fill out this whole piece here. If you know all your energy use because you've kept your bills, then you don't need any of the other energy bits. So the amount of data needed to get a meaningful insight is pretty accessible. I'm going to skip over the next because these are livestock oriented, and I think we're thinking really about barley here. So now on to kind of how the tool itself looks. The main thing I think I really want to draw attention to is this summary. So if it's starting to be tax season, and if anybody uses something like TurboTax, you see your results sometimes recalculate as you're going. And that's the kind of thing that happens with the Cool Farm Tool. So as you make a change in your inputs, you can see how that impacts the results. And not just in total, you could also, this is a drop down here where it says total, you can do that per unit of land or per unit of production. But you can also see what the categories of emissions are and how they all add up to the total. Yeah. When you are done with your assessment completely, it brings you to this results tab, and you can see your results in greater detail. We can cover this also in the live tool. This slide is, again, something anyone who is really delving in, we can go into more detail, but it's about sharing data. So there's sort of an elegant, lightweight way to do that in the Cool Farm Tool, where an owner of a share code can have access to data that is shared to that share code and then export an aggregate report. And that includes all the data inputs as well as the results, so that you can do all the analysis on those correlations that you would care to do. Okay, we're close to the end here. Just two last slides. This one is about the future directions of the Cool Farm Tool. So some of the things that are in the pipeline. Strengthening interoperability and data-driven insights. We're building a certified advisor scheme. And also building out more learning platforms and content and guidance, training sessions and resources. In the tool itself, as I mentioned, we're working on an upgrade to the perennials module, so how to handle multi-year crops, and also the soil carbon sequestration module is going through a number of kind of iterative enhancements in the next couple of years. I think that mostly we can skip over this slide. If anyone is interested in membership, which we are very excited to welcome that interest, I can take those people through these benefits of membership in the Alliance. But just as you would expect, sort of brand visibility and being part of this community. But on the Cool Farm Tool side, I guess also, as mentioned, there are additional software features beyond what is free to the free license. So I will leave it there in terms of a general overview and open it up to questions. And if the questions merit, we can also hop on and do a live demo of the tool. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So with that, I know I have some questions, but I'd love to open it up to the rest of the group to go ahead and ask your questions first.
Ashley, Rodrigo Vilches here from Bournemouth. I believe Daniela mentioned that that there are companies reporting on SPTI based on Cool Farm Tool data. My understanding is that Cool Farm Tool can provide some of the basic data in full compliance with SPTI, but it's not entire. I mean, you're going to need some extra information that it's not coming from the tool. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to have your full SBTI Scope 3 report in place. Is that correct, or Cool Farm Tool can do that by itself?
Sure, I get to rehearse my answer here. This is the most asked question these days, and we're actually going to be putting a little communications out on the topic. So the guidance is still in draft form, and from my understanding, there is no tool in existence that is fully compliant with the guidance. We are, however, very actively reviewing in detail what it contains and what we would need to change. Now, there's some things that we know already that we need to sort of adjust about the Cool Farm Tool to bring it into greater compliance. And these are things like separating out in our reporting the fossil-based emissions from the biogenic emissions. We need to, we currently report those things in a joined up manner. So we just need to present those, like I'm imagining, we would on the results tab have some kind of a swap where you press a button and you show the same results in different ways. So one is around, separating out those emissions, biogenic and fossil, things like also separating out sequestration and carbon removals from the emissions and being able to report those disaggregated from each other. We currently show the results by category, but also in net. So in addition to the net, we want to show them disaggregated. So these kinds of things are in the works in order to bring the Cool Farm Tool kind of into alignment with the reporting requirements. Not that anything really needs to change about what is done. It's just a sort of a change in how it's reported. There are some gaps that we've known about actually for about 15 years now in terms of compliance with greenhouse gas protocol. And those are things like refrigerants, which are not included currently in the Cool Farm Tool. There's many crops for which refrigerants is not an issue. So in those cases, there is already an alignment with the protocols and standard. So, I mean, that's my sort of first order answer. Beyond that, it's still a matter of looking through the guidance and determining what else we need to adjust. But I guess just to say, every intention to bring the Cool Farm Tool into alignment with those reporting guidance and standards. Does that help? What's the follow-up? Yeah, please feel free to keep.
Thank you. No, thank you for that, Daniela. Yes, I think. I mean, I've been talking with the team of Cool Farm Tool the last few months, and my understanding is the same. That it's a matter of just trying to organize the reporting system in a different type of protocol.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's put it that way. And talking about probably the other question is really about how can we make sure that the tool is more farmer friendly. I mean, it's a good industry standard type of tool, no question about that. But I mean, we have been using Cool Farm Tool for years now, and well, we don't have any experience with the API part, but the rest of the tool, I mean, we have been using that in several countries, and we're still, fighting a bit with the fact that it does require a bit of time from the farmer to actually get the tool, to get the information into the tool. And that's the reason why we have worked with the agri teams of the last few years to actually help, on the data gathering process. But the reality is that on the way forward, those agro teams might not be there in the future, or the size of those teams is not going to be that large. And of course, we are working with thousands of farmers. So for us, you know, the possibility of having a true farmer tool type of approach with an app that in ideal world should be, I don't know, based out of a app in a cell phone type of thing, is in our opinion the way to go. I don't know if there is any plans on that, Daniela, because I mean today it's a great industry tool, let's put it that way. How can we move Cool Farm tool to be a true farmer tool in the future?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a core interest of the Cool Farm Alliance. We've so definitely bring that question and that conversation to all of your conversations with the Cool Farm Alliance. We're gathering in person for the first time this year in May. And that is the kind of thing we really want to hear from our members. What are your priorities? Now, a handheld, app version of the Cool Farm tool has also been on the wish list, for many, many years. And it's been a matter of finding the funds. We, as a not-for-profit, we don't collect much by way of membership fees. We're for the first time ever now charging for API use, which is going to start to generate the kinds of funds that we would need to answer these kinds of challenges. How can you make it more user-friendly? How can you make it more portable? We simply haven't had the the funds or the bandwidth. We've had so much to do to get the methods really, top of the line, that it's always been one of those things that fall. But I think beyond a handheld, there's also more we can do by way of being more farmer friendly and just the way the questions are asked, or the way that the tool then provides feedback as you go. And all of those kinds of improvements are really what the processes of the Cool Farm Alliance are for, is how can we build the ongoing improvements that the tool needs together. So I just encourage you to really participate fully in the membership.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
What other questions are out there?
I have a question here, Brian Schatz with Aurora Malting. I was wondering, does this tool have the capability of tying into precision agriculture? And if it does, that'd be really interesting. If it doesn't, is that planned or for the future or anything like that? I guess that's my question, is just if it's capable to work with precision agriculture.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you, Brian. So the way that question gets answered is through the application programming interface. So the precision agriculture, presumably from the tractor, from the sensors, goes into farm management software of some sort. And from there through the API can get connected into the Cool Farm tool. So it's really a matter of the software managing the precision, then, getting wired in, if that makes sense, to the Cool Farm tool.
Okay. Do you have a list of all the applications that you guys are able to work with? Like My John Deere or any of those applications?
And that's
to the group?
funny now that you ask, it sort of seems like an obvious, like we definitely should, and I don't know that we do. So that seems like an easy one to build and put back out there through our website. It would be nice, wouldn't it, to be able to look that up. What you can do in the absence and in the interim is just look on our website at the members. So our members' logos are all on the www.coolfarmtool.org under members. And then it's not a great answer because you'll have to scroll through 150 members to look for, the particular farm management outfits that you might be interested in. It is alphabetical. But yeah, that's a great suggestion. We should have that handy, and I can go back to the team and ask for it.
I have a question here.
Okay, I was going to ask you guys.
Go ahead. Hey, I'm Sebastian Epiphany Malt. So I have a handful of farmers I work with closely to grow my barley, and out of the 5, only one of them was willing to work entering data into something that's not at their farm office. So the question is, how much in control are the farmers when they enter? Can they like delete it themselves again if they think this is not what they want? Or do you guys have some kind of coding so the name and location disappears? Because they're nervous about sharing some of that data, and then other people can tell what's going on, right?
Yeah. So the data belongs to the user. There's a username and password that only they have access to. Nobody else does. And the only way even a supplier could gain access to that data is through the share code that I was mentioning, or if the farmer chose to share their login credentials with anyone. They are in complete control of it in that sense. They can delete it, they can change it, and they can share it only when and with whom they want. The data does include identifying, personal information in even lat long, and I think that there may be a use case in which lat long would not be collected if that's particularly sensitive, but it hasn't been really an issue so far, other than people asking that kind of question, like, where's my data going, who has access? And then they're just, we just try to be really clear that it doesn't go anywhere at all unless they pass it on.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Building on to that, Daniela, and thanks so much for the presentation and all the tool that you're providing. I'm Katie Wallace from New Belgium Brewing, and so I'm interested in what Rodrigo asked about as it relates to being able to demonstrate reduced emissions to meet our SBTI commitments. And so I'm curious. I know you're working with other partners already in the brewing space and beyond, and just curious to know a little bit more about, like, once the data is collected, what types of verification are you seeing companies use to have confidence in that, so that our own emissions calculations, when they are audited, stand up to that?
Right. So we don't have a lot of firsthand involvement in that side of it. Really, we try to keep, our focus on the quality of the tool and its usability and its credibility. What I know, though, is that third-party auditors and verifiers are utilized to simply review the processes. So that is, like, you wouldn't put the results, I think, on a label without a third-party verifier of some sort. And the process that third-party verifier goes through, I think, involves things like random sampling and reviewing the processes by which data is collected, maybe spot checking data. How do, if this is the number, how was it known? How was it arrived at? Is there any documentation for it? I don't know the details of how data is how those audits take place, other than to know that when it comes to putting claims on a label, it is necessary and is done. Yeah, I think Control Union, SGS or SCS, or some of the outfits utilized. There's again probably a list of auditors, certifiers, verifiers somewhere. But yeah, it's that's a little bit just beyond our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to ask a question based a little bit maybe on the functionality and then reliability of the output. Barley is very much a rotational crop. And so what we do in that barley year may be drastically different to what happens in the field during, the other crops that it's in rotation with. And just in my very early kind of playing around with the tool and looking at things, I question whether or not there's much ability to be variable year to year, and especially with barley too, having to make decisions based on the weather of that season, based on rather various pest challenges, whether insects or disease, which does impact our management. And so what I think my concern is a little bit around getting not necessarily locked in, but whether or not there's enough ability to make those management decisions year to year without completely losing any kind of carbon sequestered. It seems like these 20-year cycles almost that's kind of embedded in the tool really locks folks in when we see probably a lot more variability management year to year than that. And so I don't even know where the question's embedded in that, but it's just a concern that I've had in my research, and then also speaking with some folks that have used the tool. So maybe just touch on that a little bit, thoughts on that, and maybe even if there's members on the call that maybe have similar concerns, chime in too, and might be able to articulate it better.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a very concrete question based on, real need and real use. And I'd love to hear more of where the concern comes from. The choices that you answer in the tool are about this year. So this year, how much pesticide was used? What was your fertilization regime? Where did you get your fertilizers? How much energy was used this year? And as your rotation improves and the soil functioning improves, all of those inputs are expected to go down. When it comes, so then you would see that reflected on an annual basis, and there is quite a bit of flexibility. Unlike some other tools, you're not selecting from a typical rotation. You're literally saying, what did I do this year? So it's very tailored to your actual choices. Where the 20 years comes in, it doesn't lock you into anything at all. The way, for example, the cover cropping soil carbon sequestration is estimated, and this is under revision at the moment. So we're coming out with a new soil carbon module in April of this year, but the current one that's live, and it won't be that different, but it will have some enhancements. But the current one that's live, what it does is it looks at the range of, hundreds of studies and the range of the amount of soil carbon that has increased from a change in practice over 20 years. So it's saying, if you make this change, in general, the research has shown that after 20 years, your increase is X. And then it takes that number and divides by 20 to linearize that change and allocate a 20th of it to this year. So it doesn't mean you can't change next year. It just means, this year you got a 20th of what would be expected if you kept that up. It allows for continued flexibility year to year.
The new model, Daniela, is also going to keep the 20 years rule?
Okay, so the new model, some of the enhancements have to do with the ability to say, not just what did you change recently, but what did you change before that? And before that. So it's less binary. The current module is sort of binary, but this allows you to provide more history.
Okay.
That's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Rodrigo.
No, thanks. Good to know, because that binary challenge is, something that we have debated internally, especially with with some of our sourcing countries where we have min-till and fairly good carbon sequestration practices for more than 20 years. There is a little bit of a, sour type of flavor around that specific rule, because if it is only 20 years, it means that if you have been doing that for more than 20 years, that specific practice, the reality is that the tool is based on the model that you have today is not really going to account that much if you keep doing it.
That's exactly. That is a little bit of the, the concern, or let's say, the concern, or let's say farmers are not very excited when they read that. So that's a little bit of the point. No, I definitely understand. And sympathize with that. The scientific evidence shows that when you make a change of practice, it will in most cases increase soil organic carbon, but only to a point. And that point is somewhere between 15 and 50 years. But convention has us cut it off around 20, because then it's asymptotic, right? It might continue to rise, but quite a bit less year to year. And so in essence, it's, the amount of continued increase in soil carbon after about 20 years is not so material. And that is a scientific sort of reality that then becomes very unfortunate depending on how you're doing your accounting. Because a farmer can have changed their practice more than, as you're saying, 20 years ago, and then say, well, where's my soil carbon sequestration? And all we have to say is, well, you're probably not continuing to accrue it. You've probably plateaued, unless you do something else, new, different. We don't have a way around that just yet.
Okay.
Well, and I just want to chime in, and I'm glad this conversation is happening, because although some of our members certainly are looking to make those reductions, I think that there's also desire to find a tool that can quantify what low carbon barley looks like and be able to maintain that in the supply, because we do have farmers that switched to no-till well over 20 years ago. And so there's a concern from that producer base that, well, I can't prove any emission reductions, right? Other than maybe integrating cover crops if they haven't done that already, but I know that that's happening in the field as well. And so again, I know that the reduction piece is really important, especially to some of our members, but I think more generally speaking for our industry, that concept of low carbon barley and how can we measure and quantify that and then maintain that in our supply chain, I think is going to be just as important, and trying to find a tool that can help us do that, because there's going to be a sector, a part of our producers that just won't be able to find those reductions that some are looking for, outside of probably nitrogen inputs, and whether or not there's alternative sources for that. That's probably where we could find those reductions, but that's getting harder and harder to do right now. So yeah, so I guess that's just one thing that I've heard from folks, and I'm excited just to hear this conversation and other people thinking about this as well, because I do think that that's something that will be important to this group, working with that group of farmers, because we certainly don't want to penalize or de-incentivize them to be engaged. So
yeah, definitely. Nitrification inhibitors, biologicals and how they enhance the functioning of fertilizers, reductions in energy uses, fuel uses of all kinds. These are, other areas to look for improvements, but yeah.
Well, great. Well, we have met the end of the time with you today, Danielle. So thank you very much for your time and for the presentation. And if you're okay, I'd like to share your contact information with folks if they'd like to get in touch with you after and ask any further questions. All right.
That's super. Yeah. And also anyone can contact support@coolfarmtool.org for questions.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Right.
All right, so we will switch gears now, and I believe our next presenter might have already joined. Paul, are you on?
Also muted. Hi there.
Yeah.
Hi, Ashley.
Hey, Paul. Great. So we had some really good conversation there. So we butt up right to your time, but thank you for joining us. And so our next speaker is Paul, who from Field to Market, who's actually going to be presenting both on their National Indicators Report, but also their field print platform. So certainly a much different kind of approach tool than what we just heard about, but something also worth considering. And again, as I've said before, the field to market platform is certainly still of interest to this group because of the engagement with the National Barley Growers Association and their investment already in field to market. So I am excited to bring Paul in to talk with us a little bit about the barley integration and what we can expect from that work. And then we'll open it up for Q&A at the conclusion after that as well. All right. So Paul, I will turn it over to you, and you should be able to share any slides you may have.
Sure, sounds good. Let me give it a shot. So it's risky here on multiple monitors, but I'm going to try to see if I can get it going. Oh, did that share okay? Let's see. Let me hit share.
There we go. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
A lot of orange. No, thank you, Ashley, for letting me come in. Hopefully some similarities. We certainly know the folks from Cool Farm well, and we often hear, in fact, we're having a researcher do some comparison between the tools because we get asked the question all the time, and some of our own members use both tools. So, but thank you for allowing me to present on Field to Market. We're all but 10 people, staff at Field to Market. We have a large membership, but we're a small staff. I oversee our science and technology tracks from a management or operations perspective. And talking with Ashley, I put together a group of slides, a bit of an overview on Field to Market, but not the whole full deck. So I won't make you go through that. A bit on our calculator or our tool for measurement of sustainability. A little bit on the National Indicators Report, kind of talk to you about how that dovetails in with what we do as an organization, how it fits as compared to the FieldPrint calculator or measurement tool, and then close out talking about our equivalency with the with Sci platform. And I'm never good as a tech and project person about consolidating slides, so probably more than I need here. So I'll go through them quickly and leave time for discussion in case I hit on things you'd like to expand on. And if there are questions along the way, that's fine as well. So Field to Market, I think we're the largest organization in the U.S., multi-stakeholder organization focused on the sustainability of commodity crop production. Been in Field to Market now about 7 years, and we've had, thankfully, very steady growth. And there's been an increase in that interest over the last couple of years, certainly with the USDA's Climate Smart grant. There's even more interest. We have around, I think we're at 172 members now, including, as Ashley said, National Barley Growers Association and many other grower organizations. And slide, the logos are getting a little small, but I think it does its job in terms of just showing the reach of Field to Market across the food and ag supply chain where we really do focus. This is our, sort of why sustainable agriculture and the definition, but I think, the take home point for us is really the sense that having a convening organization like Field to Market, we started 15 years ago, sort of early on when there were questions around what is sustainability, how do you respond to consumer questions around sustainability, its impact on farmer livelihoods, how do food companies and commodity organizations respond to sustainability, how do we get a common measurement platform, what do we measure, what is sustainability, what is progress. So Field to Market really started out as a convening body, I guess progressed, advanced to also include a very important science component. Then more, I would say in the last 5-6 years, formalized more of a program that kept convening, but also really focused on bringing supply chain partners together to work with farmers to measure sustainability. And I'll touch on exactly what we mean by that within Field to Market's context. I think our strategic priorities happen to really lay out, I think, our focus. So convening is really a big deal. We have a big membership, but it's not just about membership. They attend our twice yearly plenary meetings. Members are part of our committee meetings, our metrics, standards, and education. We have work groups in different areas, task forces like in greenhouse gas standards or protocols. We have a science advisory council. I have a tech advisory council that I manage. So this idea of convening stakeholders is really important to us. The science-based leadership is huge as well. That's been a key part. I'll talk about the metrics, sort of what do we actually measure. at the field level for commodity crops like barley. But it's really been important. We have a science team. We've developed metrics probably over the last 10 years. That's in partnership with members, our Science Advisory Council, outside universities, and other experts that have come together to sort of nurture along our metrics. A big thing we've been doing in the past year or so, and certainly connected with Climate Smart Grant, is the idea of identifying and promoting innovative strategies. You know, I didn't bring a slide on this, but this idea of sort of the triangle of, which is, you know, really about technical support, financial support, but also looking at human dimensions and understanding what moves the needle in a very practical way. So this idea of what are the strategies to really help promote the advancement of conservation practices is a big part of what we do. Scaling impact through partnership, that sounds a lot of marketing speak, but it really is true. I mean, what we do is bring companies together in that pre-competitive space, provide a cookbook, which I'll talk about, sort of how companies and commodity organizations work within the supply chain to advance sustainability, and then enabling the communications. How can companies and organizations talk about the advancement of sustainability? How can we spotlight farmers and commodity organizations that are doing well? And so again, that's a big part of what we do. I think a really important part of field to market, which we remain proud of, is sort of the degree to which all aspects of the supply chain are at the table in the development of our program. We don't want this to be a top-down. We don't want this to be all about food companies dictating down to the growers what sustainability looks like. So every aspect of our membership and our committees are populated by members, but in a sector balanced way, even down to our board of directors and our executive committee. So we have growers, civil, agribusiness, public sector, and brands and retail representation at the table at all times. So the grower representation, like the Barley Association, is huge to us. So as we make decisions about defining things, modifying our metrics, updating our process-based standard on projects, putting out the next national indicators report, the feedback that we get really comes from across the sector, and that's huge to us. These are sort of, I guess I would say, kind of the baked-in DNA pieces of field to market. Again, being grounded in science, that's a huge part of what we do. I'll talk about that, being quantitative, actually measuring things and doing it in a way that's not greenwashing, and that's practical for farmers. It's difficult to balance these things. We're also outcomes-based. So our program isn't intending to measure a farmer's sustainability or a group of farmers in a project as good or bad, or sustainable or not sustainable. It's about how do you baseline current activity and sustainability? How do you bring people together to bring about change, practice changes, or in any other aspect? And how do you measure that progress? So the idea is to look at outcomes, not tagging or checking a box. And we're technology neutral, probably not a surprise with the members around the table. We don't look at GMO, non-GMO, organic, non-organic. That's not really of interest. We're just looking at developing that platform for sustainability. Our program, zeroing in on crops that we support in our calculator, our tool, you're seeing there on the screen, 11 crop and feed pathways, and of course, including barley. We added a few of those. I think barley was added 3 or 4 years ago in one of the releases of our platform. So all those crops are supported, meaning that projects that are put together, growers can be brought to the table and enter data on any of the crops that you see there. And I should say, and I could delve into this of interest, part of our metrics also look at things like soil conservation. So they take into account crop rotation history, and we use NRCS modeling tools for soil and water erosion. So there are often growers who are in the tool to measure sustainability for a certain crop, but they may have other crops in rotation that we don't support, which is perfectly fine. Well, it may not be that often, maybe of corn and tomatoes. We don't support calculation or sustainability on tomatoes, but it could be in the crop rotation history, and that's perfectly fine. We follow NRCS standards in that front. But these are our 8 metrics. So biodiversity, and I should say these are field scale, right? So these are looking at a particular grower on field A in 2023 corn, barley, wheat season. This is down to the field level. So biodiversity, energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, if irrigated water use, land use, soil conservation, which again is really erosion, soil carbon. At this point, we're using you're familiar with the soil conditioning index, it's more of a qualitative view of whether you're increasing or decreasing soil carbon. And then water quality, again, using an NRCS metric using steps. So we really feel strongly at Field to Market that what's important is to look at sort of take a holistic view of sustainability. Soil carbon is obviously all the rage, if you will, and it is important to us as well. But what we always try to emphasize is that we want to look across the whole sort of span of sustainability metrics. And that's really important to us. And we think it's important to most of the members. So some things have an emphasis, some projects are zeroed in on biodiversity or soil carbon, or maybe it's irrigated water use. That's great. At the end of the day, though, we really want to look at the field level across all those sustainability metrics. And if you step back a little bit, look at our sort of the aspects of convening and membership and all that comes with that, there's also this sort of idea of how do we bring all this together? We call it our continuous improvement accelerator, but I would talk about it in terms of really providing a framework or a cookbook for member organizations, whether commodity or CPGs or ag companies, ag input companies. How do you come together to look at change on the ground and work with farmers? What are the rules for registering projects? How do you look at data acquisition? How do you look at verification? How do you look at credible claims that you could make? What are the metrics that you measure? So our continuous improvement accelerator was really a way of packaging that process so that our member companies can engage in the supply chain on sustainability. So, and that was really important for a number of reasons. One, we want to make sure we have a formula that brings companies together. And I have a couple slides giving you examples of that. When we talk about projects, I was working earlier today, a great example is Mondelez, right? Big company, they have Triscuits, we're all familiar with. They're looking at sustainability in a very broad way, but one piece of that is looking at the sustainability of their wheat sourcing in the thumb of Michigan and looking at how they can improve the growers that are involved in that. So they're engaging those growers, they're partnering with a university, they're partnering with a local co-op, they probably have crop advisors, maybe NRCS, all together. They're starting up a project, setting their goals, baselining that data, and then looking at improvement over time. So that multi-stakeholder collaboration is important. The locally led conservation, that's one thing we really want to make sure that we're talking about local level projects. They're usually grower shed or sourcing based. Flexibility too. Mondelez may want one thing, Pepsi another, barley growers another. It depends on the project. Some projects are just after engaging growers on an educational perspective. Some are looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. More often, you're looking at practice change. Can I introduce adoption of cover crops, increase the frequency? Can I encourage a more conservation tillage? Can I reduce nitrogen? Can I reduce irrigated water? Every project looks different, and our framework for projects allows for that flexibility. We have projects with 12 growers. We have projects with 200 and 500. It just depends on the purpose of that member. We really do want to provide shared value. We have a lot of projects and we encourage them to bring the value back down to the grower. We're somewhat at arm's length. I should emphasize, we're not managing those projects. Those project sponsors like a Mondelez, a Pepsi, an ADM, et cetera, they're sponsoring, they're organizing their group. We're providing the framework for how they operate. And we really want to encourage that those projects hold workshops, bring that data back to the grower. How did this project do? Why is my greenhouse gas emissions 20% higher than my other 200 farmers in my cohort? Share those things in workshops and bring the data back to them. We want to make sure it's transparent. So we have a public portal. You can go to Field to Market, click on the member portal and see the list of projects that are out there by crop, by area, by food company. And every company, and we're actually doing some work on this on our portal, so some of this is down, but every project has to indicate what are your goals in farmers and acres and what are your other goals that you have. And every year report back into Field to Market at that top level. So everyone understands what you're going after and there's transparency. And then again, to be able to talk about what action has been taken and what progress has been made. So we have probably cumulative over 4 million acres. That map, I know it's probably small on your screen, but those dots or those flags represent projects around the country. There's projects in 37 states. We have, I think, closer to 70 active projects today and many more that are completed. Some are short-term, some are 3 or 4 years, some are ongoing. By the way, you could go to fieldofmarket.org, but if you want, you can put your camera at the QR code. That would take you to the project portal. But all this I have in links at the end. So that just gives you a sense of the project activity on the ground, engaging growers that's happening. And I just wanted to give you kind of a crystallization, if you will, of what we mean by a project and how we bring those things together. I mentioned this project's actually finished, but this was Central Nebraska Irrigation Project. It was sponsored by Cargill, Nestle Purina, Nature Conservancy, focused in Nebraska. We have different pathways, sort of where the project's focusing. But the point was, they were focused on all the metrics, but they were particularly focused on reducing irrigated water. And if you looked at our irrigation water metric, it's pretty simple. How much water did you apply? How much water would you have applied if you didn't irrigate? Or what would your yield be? Forgive me. It's very simple. But the real value in the project is how do you bring those sponsors together to leverage benefits to the grower? So this project looked at, can we provide flow meters to the growers? Can we bring weather station data for more accurate irrigation scheduling? Can we do pivot telemetry to increase the control of the pivot rather than just do standard, et cetera? Can we have better nozzles? Can we control it? And at the end of the day, the goal is to reduce that water use. And that gets plugged into our calculator, and it's a simple calculation, but the real value sits within bringing those sponsors like Cargill, Nestle, and Nature Conservancy together to bring funds, technical assistance, hopefully financial assistance to those farmers to demonstrate new technologies and then make a difference as a project. And those companies get to talk about the improvements they made from a sustainability perspective. So I just wanted to show at least an example of that. One more example, would be our partner of the year. It was a Pepsi, a Unilever, ADM, Cargill. Put aside the details, it's just another example of how we try to bring collaborators together to benefit the food companies and the commodity crops that want to talk about improvement, and also the growers that are on the ground that want to see an actual benefit other than asking them for their data and their time. So, and then lastly, sort of what is our tool? And by the way, I'm being a little half-hearted comparing to Cool Farm, but along those similar lines. So Field to Market's tool, we call the Field Platform or Calculator more affectionately. We have a web interface for that. It's freely available to farmers. There's some guest accounts in there. Someone could sort of get a quick sense for the kind of data that's collected. So we've had that tool that's available, but we also built out an interface so that if projects or food companies want to, they can actually engage through other providers. So if Mondelez happens to operate within our website, but there are other projects that operate through Nutrient Agrable or Syngenta LandDB, meaning they can work with their growers where they already exist and where their data already exists. So not surprisingly, a lot of farmers are working with John Deere. John Deere hooked up to our metrics. They're doing some piloting around cotton. That's a lot easier for the grower because much of their data is already in there. And then John Deere can provide the sustainability measurement plus everything else they're providing to those growers. So we have 8 data partners today. I would say most of our data actually goes through those partners. 80% of the project data runs through those, what we would call qualified data management partners. And then, sort of, well, what kind of data do we collect? When we're talking about growers in projects, we really are talking about the data that you would expect. Did you practice 4 Rs? What was your fertilizer application? What was your seeding rate? How much water did you apply? What is your crop history? Sort of the typical as applied and management related data that you would expect to collect for any kind of calculation. That's generally consistent across a number of tools. Ours is probably more hyper-focused because it's at the field level. We're US focused. We're not focused outside. A lot of our data behind the scenes and our models that integrate are USDA based. So we are confined to the US in terms of our measurement. Apologize for the dog. But so that's the type of data that we collect. And there's some variation among crops, but I would say barley, corn, soy are pretty consistent, but obviously things like seeding rates, drying methods differ in the interface for depending on what crop you pick. Crops like alfalfa obviously have different inputs because you're asking about cuttings. Sugar beets or rice would have additional inputs as well in terms of like, is it alternate wetting and drying, et cetera. So that's the nature of the data. And this is just another sort of view of the world. So those are the crops you see in the gray box, the kind of data that plugs into it. We operate and analyze sustainability at that crop year level, meaning 2023, I have barley on my field and I'm in a barley project and I'm being asked to enter one or more of my seasonal data sets for that project. That cranks into our metrics supplemented by USDA models you see in sort of the bottom right. And then we crunch out some reports, which I'll show in a second. And again, whether that could be through our calculator or through one of our providers. So that's kind of the nature of the data and kind of the flow for how we operate as a platform. And these are just some quick screenshots giving you a sense, sort of under the hood, if you go to the calculator interface. To give you a quick sense, this would be an example of a grower. I don't know why I picked an example of the corn and rice rotation. That's probably pretty rare, but this is example data. But this example where farmers created a field and started adding crop years that they've been asked to put as part of a project. We provide a mechanism for how far am I in data collection? Did I mark it finalized? Is it part of a project already? Or is my analysis run? So we kind of have the tools to do that. This is just an example of some of the inputs. We ask about cover crops. Do you have one? What is the dominant species? Is it winter hardy, for example? And what was the timing? And a lot of this, for example, plugs into our water quality metric because we care about the cover on the ground. It would also influence erosion as well, as you would imagine. Another example of sort of adding fertilizer information. We think about the number of trips taken over a field, and each trip, what did you apply? We have some canned fertilizer, whether it's anhydrous or DAP, or one could just put in a blend of NPK or a rate of NPK. And again, we're asking things like, what was the timing of that? Was that before planting, during planting, after? What was your application method? Was it incorporated in 48 hours? All these things getting to things like energy embedded in the fertilizer, or the impact of that timing as it relates to biodiversity or to water quality. All these inputs kind of tie into those metrics. And then ultimately at a single grower level, we present the data in what we call a spider diagram or a radar chart. And the idea, this is really just a contextual diagram. The smaller that blue footprint, the better the performance across all those metrics. This one shows all 8 because it was an irrigated example. We also have state and national benchmarks, which I could touch on, that are really, they're kind of looking in the rearview mirror with similar methodology for calculation, but they're at state level. So we always kind of caution people on that. It's sort of like, I'm on my field, or I know what my car's miles per gallon is, but what's the state average? Well, that state average has trucks and hybrids. So it's helpful, but it's not exact, but it does provide me a frame of reference for whether I'm doing better or worse, if you will. And then we really drill down and provide some very detailed data to the grower. So this is an example at the energy metric level. We're really drilling down and saying to the grower, based on our standard, consensus built standard, you can actually see the contributions to your energy. And I could see, if I look at this one, that fertilizer, no surprise, and lime are large contributors to my energy and will also be to my greenhouse gas emissions. There's a bit of manure loading. This was had manure applications. I didn't irrigate, I didn't have any drying for post-harvest, and I didn't transport to a buyer point. So this, and there's also some management energy. So this gives me a picture. If I'm a project sponsor, there are places now I can look at with my project and see where I can make progress. And it's important to say that, again, this is single grower, but at a project level, if you think of the Mondelez project or that irrigation project, we're aggregating that grower data and providing an aggregated metric score. And it's that score that gets compared year over year on progress. And then this is just an example of the water quality metric. So water quality metric STEP from NRCS looks at loss pathways for phosphorus and nitrogen. And so some of the questions we ask relate to management practices. And then we use the soil data to determine, like, is this field, does it have a high sensitivity to a loss pathway? And that could be to phosphorus. Now, it could be somewhere up in Wisconsin areas where there's high phosphorus and you can do whatever you want, and it's always going to be high. So we provide some detail to at least look at the mitigation that's been done and provide the growers some feedback. Yeah, you need improvement in surface phosphorus, but there's other detail behind the scenes would say you've made inroads to your management practices, but here's what else you could do to get that over the hump and flag that as mitigated. So again, just one illustration among all the metrics about the detail that we try to convey either at the farmer level or at a project reporting level. And then a few more slides here. We have a few publications. I should mention the National Indicators Report. I'll certainly touch a little bit more on that, give you a sense of like how that fits. We have a climate compendium. That's us working with our member companies to kind of understand what kind of goals they set across the sphere of those companies as it relates to climate. We have innovative financial innovations to accelerate sustainable agriculture. That's really those blueprints for how organizations can engage with farmers or projects from a financial incentive perspective. The National Indicators Report, it's a publication roughly every 4 years that we put out. I think the take-home point I would say on the Indicators Report, it is a macro view of the industry. So on one hand, you have projects where supply chain partners, food companies, commodity organizations, ag tech companies, universities come together for a specific need in a certain area to engage growers and measure progress and talk about it. The National Indicators really is a publication that's meant to help commodity groups just have a broad brush view, macro level view of how commodities are doing across some of those same metrics. So we do calculate metrics, some of them land use, irrigation, soil erosion, energy, and GHG. Some of them like biodiversity and soil carbon and water quality, they're just, we look at sort of we provide an analysis based on reports and publications, but it's not quantitative. But it is important, again, to think that the indicators report is broad brush. Obviously, at the field level, talking to a grower, asking him to measure, we know what his soil is. We know what his tillage practices are. We're going to calculate your greenhouse gas emissions down to the letter. The indicators report, of course, takes broad brush averages of tillage systems across the country. Similarly, the platform, we can plug in erosion data. We know where your field is. We know where your weather stations are close to it. We know all the detail you've told us. We'll give you your exact erosion according to NRCS standards. But when it comes to the indicators report trends, we're using data from either NAS data or simulation results from statisticians and USDA. And so it's a great report. It's available on our website. There's a link at the end of this. You can break it down by crop. Again, we have a lot of commodity crops that at least use it as a frame of reference for how their industry is doing. The numbers that you see in this table, standing alone, may not be so helpful. It's really the trending that one cares about. So we've done this. We've looked at data over past the 2 decades. And so you sort of see the trends that come across in those 5 metrics. Soil erosion is probably more meaningful, but then just quickly, you could look at trends, for example, in areas planted. I'm not an agronomist, but I can tell that barley areas planted has gone down over the last couple decades. If I looked here at production in millions of bushels, there's been some trending downwards to 2020. And then also, if I were to look as one other example or excerpt, greenhouse gas emissions, it's generally flat with some decrease. So the report provides many more graphs and more discussion, as well as a methodology section that gives a little bit more detail into sort of how we look at the National Indicators Report data. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention some of the harmonization efforts. I mentioned at the beginning, SCI Platform, Sustainability Ag Initiative. So one of our goals here is to say, if you've invested time in a project and you've gathered data from growers, how else could you leverage that data? So we work with SCI, we're one of many organizations, to get an equivalency. We have one existing. The idea is, I think SCI is maybe, I could be wrong here, around 100 questions in their survey. It's down today with the previous version to 15 questions. So if I'm a farmer enrolled in Field to Market, and I've been asked by my project to complete the SCI survey, I have about 15 more questions to ask, and then I can get my rating, whether I'm bronze or whatever it might be. We just went through the equivalency. We haven't formally announced it, but we're done. And in June we will, and we got to update our website. I think there'll be about 20 some questions with FSA 3.0. So what we have are projects that encourage their growers to enter their data for our metrics, but then ask them to go in and complete the size survey. Then that project can begin to report out their average score across all their growers. So and I'm happy to ask more. We also have some data interchange with USDA CART or RSET, where growers can dump their data in a format that's helpful. And same thing with TSC or the Sustainability Consortium. So we try wherever we can. We've done some stuff with Wisconsin SNAP Plus, for example, we're always trying to work on sort of the data interoperability opportunities, just again, to leverage the data that's already collected. So I think that's the last slide, Ashley. I'll stop there. I apologize if that went against everything I just took in a facilitator training, which says slow down, but I wanted to cover the slides and also keep enough time here.
No, all is well, Paul, all is well. If you want to go ahead and stop share, then we can just get everybody's
Yep.
faces back on the
I'll
screen
do that.
easily enough. So thank you for
sure.
that and your presentation. So with that, what questions do we have for Paul?
I got a question. The growers that participate in field to market, are they a 1 year and done kind of thing, or are they working with it year after year for 10 years? Or I guess, do you guys know the percentages of the usage, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have the usage offhand, but it's a reasonable question. I would say, because the nature of our program is to look at continuous improvement over time, certainly projects are always 2 to 3 years, if not a little bit longer, because the idea is really to baseline and then look at the progress. And so really, in some sense, while projects do report, let's say, on the total greenhouse gas emissions in their project or the average soil erosion, to be able to talk about improvement really takes at least year 2 to compare to that baseline. So I would say most projects are in that 2 to 4 year range. There's really been a kick up in the number of projects over the last 4 to 5 years. So I don't know if that helps, but most are multiple years for the purpose of getting a trend in outcomes.
One of the things that came up in the last presentation, and actually has come up almost every single time our group has met, is that some of our organizations are working towards those science-based targets and having a level of integration with SBTI and being able to meet that guidance. And so I'm just curious, what does that look like with integration with field to market?
Yeah, and Coralie Pierre on our team is the go-to person for that. So I'm hesitant to say much other than we are tracking it. We have a work group we're working with, and we're monitoring, submitting. We I think just submitted comments towards that. And I'd be happy to forward some information to you, Ashley. I don't want to dodge your question. I just want to be careful, but it's high on our radar. Not surprisingly, the companies around our the membership table are highly interested. I think Field to Market's platform is part of the review, the tools that are in there, and there is some piloting going on by Pepsi and some other companies that we're getting feedback on. I also sense there's quite a bit in flux around that GHG protocol and et cetera that's going on, but I'm happy to tie Coralie into that discussion to make sure you get a clear sense of what we're doing. We understand the importance.
Yeah, no, great, thank you. And I wonder too if that doesn't, I don't want to say set your tool apart a little bit differently, is that there's certainly the GHG, as you said before, is important, but that yours is looking a bit more comprehensively beyond just that, and that singular focus isn't there as some tools. I feel like that is kind of what the cornerstone of the work is, whereas I feel like Field to Market is looking at things a bit more broadly, or am I interpreting that incorrectly?
No, I think that's fair. And in fairness, I think Cool Farm now has water quality and biodiversity as well, but certainly to us, and I should say, again, in all transparency, we're working in a collaborative way to look at plugging in a new soil carbon metric that has a quantitative measure of soil carbon sequestration. We do have an integration of Comet Planner built into the platform. It doesn't dovetail directly with the metrics, but the climate smart projects will use it. So we've kind of duplicated with permission what USDA has, but we're looking at, with many other companies in the supply chain, to look at kind of a multi-ensemble approach to soil carbon sequestration. So we have a work group going, and we're looking, it's probably gonna take a little time to plug in a new soil carbon metric. But the importance of it is obviously huge. We're not going to be a soil carbon market, but obviously it's important that we can provide a more quantitative measure of soil carbon. So, but yeah, I mean, to your question, we feel there's still a lot of companies around the table that are looking at wanting to have a broader picture of sustainability, but we understand the focus on soil carbon, like we get it. So we're not naive to, and we're not here to pitch. We're a member-led organization, so our members are driving that discussion, and it's very important. So,
Great, thanks. Other questions from the group? Man, I feel like folks are being shy today. One thing I just want to throw out there is I don't think our barley growers have been very engaged with field to market in terms of ground truthing the data that's going even into the National Indicators Report. I think there's also a concern, at least from our organizations that work with farmers directly, that there's a lot of nuance in barley production.
Yeah.
Whether it be irrigated or dry land, whether or not we're using conservation tillage, whether or not cover crops are being incorporated, and then just from a geographical perspective, right? Just because different soil types, different climates. And so, again, I did this to the last speaker. I don't know if I even have a question, but more of a concern about how do we fix that? Like, how do we do that? Because I would hesitate to roll into a project right away, knowing that we have some groundwork to do to solidify and kind of shore up those barley metrics. And I don't know, is like, where's the chicken and egg?
Yeah,
like what comes first? And so I just wanted to kind of open up that conversation as well.
it's a fair question, and I can't help but put on my field to market hat and say a big part of what we do is to have organizations like yours at the table to help us through that. And so on one hand, I understand sort of if you're thinking sort of from a membership perspective, why join when it's not ready? We can't help but make the argument that we want organizations like yours to be at the table and to work with us, to join up on the metrics committee, to join into cross-sector dialogues, to provide input, to pilot a project, perhaps get another food company or whatever related company that's using malt barley to engage at the table, provide some lessons learned, and inform the metric review process. We have an ongoing, this year we're actually looking at energy and GHG. We're just making some tweaks to biodiversity. The inroads and the progress that we make really does come from the member organizations. As it relates to the National Indicators Report, I get that too. Like we've had, if things look great, they say perfect report. When it doesn't look great, it's like, well, the data's not there. And we get that. Like there are plenty of limitations. And as we're already thinking forward to the next iteration of the report, we're reaching out to try to shore up some of the gaps in that data. But, I can personally just say, we would love the engagement and the participation in pilot projects where, we've done this a little bit with sorghum, for example, where we've said, we'd love for you to come to the table, work with some of your places that you supply to or growers supply to, pick a food company, get some financial participation, then put a project together and find out where there are data gaps. And again, because sometimes I often forget this, it is a multi-stakeholder membership organization. Like as us as staff, we're here to do the work, no doubt, but it really is a participation of the members, whether commodity groups or ag tech or universities, that really help nurture everything along. So I guess I would say, we always encourage everyone to be part of the solution. I know that sounds cheesy, but I would really say that it's true. And I think there would be value in what Field to Market provides as a place to participate in that. It goes back to that earlier sector slide, that we don't want to continue having barley as a crop in the platform where barley growers say, well, that doesn't represent what we do. And we want to affect the change, and we want a member at the table saying, no, look, we're here. We want to participate, but this is what we need to make this useful for us. And that's really our role as staff, is to respond to that. So that's a roundabout answer to you, but it's honestly how we do feel about it, because often the commodity orgs have the scientist and the agronomist at the table that can then be informative to our science team as we go to make those improvements. So, I mean, that's a soft sell here, but that is honestly the way we kind of position it.
Fair enough. Well, with that, does anyone have one last question that they would like to shoot Paul's way? If not, we just have some housekeeping stuff to take care of at the end. All right. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for bringing the Field to Market platform to us and helping us understand that a little bit better. No problem. And I know you're recording. I could also shoot you a PDF of the presentation if it's helpful. And again, thank you for just letting us share. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Sounds good. Thanks, Paul. Take care.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Well, thanks to all of you that have held in till the end. While I've got you, I just wanted to I'm going to drop a couple things in the chat, actually. The House Ag Committee actually just had their first hearing for 2023, looking ahead to the Farm Bill. And there was actually some really interesting both testimony and then also questioning from House representatives regarding Scope 3 emissions as it relates to agriculture. So it is a long hearing, but if this interests you at all, and I know that I had sent out some links on this previously, there's quite a bit of, as we can imagine, disagreement about whether or not farmers should be held to those same Scope 3 emission reporting requirements. So it was just kind of interesting to hear the testimony back and forth. Testimony was from American Farm Bureau, but also the National Farmers Union, folks from the transportation sector, and then a couple commodities and livestock producers. So good dialogue. I enjoyed the testimony, even if you just played in the background while you're working along. I found it really informative, especially as we're heading to DC this weekend to do our lobbying trip. So it's always good to know what words are triggering people and what we can talk about. The other thing I just wanted to mention really quickly, and I'm going to drop this in the chat as well. Oh, let's see. That's a really long link. I hope that's live and gets you where it needs to go. But next month, I'm hoping to actually switch gears a little bit, as I said in my email, and thinking more about how we can work directly with our farmers and developing strategies around how can we improve practices in barley production, maybe thinking more about that kind of what does low carbon barley look like. And so Abby Wick is a professor, researcher, extension person at North Dakota State University. She recently got funding through the Walmart Foundation to develop this program called the Trusted Advisor Partnership, or TAP. And they are working through CCAs, or certified crop agronomists, to advisors, to work with farmers to actually implement soil health practices. So as you listen to this podcast, if you take the time to do so, think about what it could look like if we modeled something on this, whether it be the agronomists at our beverage companies, the agronomists at the malting companies. But what if we develop some resources and strategies around soil health practices specific to barley production? I've had some conversations with Abby. I've also had conversations with the Sustainable Food Lab, who's helping coordinate some of this. And I know some of you have already been very engaged with the Sustainable Food Lab. But the three of us are coming together for a meeting about a week before our next sustainability meeting, which is in April. And so I'm excited to maybe talk about what I'm learning there and what we might be able to translate to the work we're doing. So if you get the chance, it's not a very long podcast, listen to it. And again, like I said, just think about what this could mean if we brought together agronomists working in the beverage industry. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully I'll have more when we meet in April. And just to conclude, we do meet again in April. We're doing that in conjunction with our tech and board meetings in Milwaukee. And so if you're already in person for those meetings, I would love for you to come early so you can be in person. But please just know if you're not able to be in person that we will have the Zoom connection for that as well. So again, everyone and all is welcome. If there's other people at your organization you think need to be in these meetings, make sure you let me know so I can get them added to the invite. So we are at 2:30, so I will zip it now. But is there anything anyone wants to share or questions as people start diving off? All right. Well, we ran out of time, but hopefully we'll have some time to unpack our speakers next month. I was hoping we wouldn't run quite as late, but I'd love to just let you all digest on the field to market and Cool Farms tool, and then maybe we can have some discussion around that in April, okay?
Thanks so much,
All
Ashley.
right.
That was really helpful. Really appreciate it.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Thanks, Ashley.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.